welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to film my POTS story, how it all started and how I got diagnosed, and it's actually a really fitting time because the 3rd of March, which is next week from when I'm filming this, it has been 2 years since I got ill, which I can't believe because in some ways it feels like I've never been well, and in some ways it feels like it hasn't been 2 years. It's crazy. It's been a 2-year blur, if I'm honest. So I thought, what better time to film a video to you guys and tell you how it all began. And I also think it's more interesting because some people's happens gradually over a long period of time and it's symptoms that they may not notice, and some people's POTS develops literally overnight, which is what happened to me. So first of all, I'm going to give you a short introduction to what POTS is. So POTS is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, and it basically means that when a normal person stands up, their blood by gravity is forced down to their feet and their veins constrict to push the blood straight back up to their brains. But when a person with POTS stands up, because their autonomic nervous system doesn't work properly, the blood falls to their feet, but the signals get messed up, so their vessels aren't told to constrict, so the blood pools in your legs and arms and it just sits there and the vessels aren't constricted, so nothing's pushing it back up to your brain. So after not very long, a panic signal gets sent from your brain because your brain senses that it's got a lack of oxygen. The brain signals to the heart, oh my gosh, we're going to pass out, and it makes the heart go absolutely crazy. So when a normal person stands up, their heart rate might go up by 10 to 15 beats. When a person with POTS stands up, their heart rate goes up by over 30, and in my case often over 100 beats. So that just gives one aspect of POTS. There is so much more to POTS than heart rates and fainting and dizziness. Your autonomic system literally controls everything you don't think about. So it controls your breathing, it controls your digestion, literally it controls so many organs and systems, and there are so many interlinked symptoms that POTS causes. But the main symptom and the symptom that gets you diagnosed is the increase in heart rate upon standing and symptoms associated with that, which would be like dizziness, headaches, fainting, shaking, palpitations, chest pain, shortness of breath, all of those sort of things that you would expect. So that is a short little introduction to POTS, and I'm now going to tell you my story of how it all began. So here we go. My POTS began on the 3rd of March 2016, and many people say to me, how on earth do you remember the specific day? Like, that's so specific. I wouldn't remember that day, and the reason I remember that day is because it literally happened like that. I went from a completely healthy 15-year-old sprinting in a PE lesson to someone on the floor half conscious, shaking like a leaf, feeling the most unwell I've ever felt in my life. So it happened very abruptly, and it's most certainly a day that I won't forget because it was the day that my life changed, and up until this point has never gone back to any even half normality that it was before. So we'd been in a PE lesson, which, I mean, I wasn't bad at sports, I wasn't amazing at sports, I was just sort of average. I enjoyed it, I liked running, I wasn't amazing at it, but you know, it was alright. And in this particular lesson we were doing sprinting exercises, so we were sprinting back and forth, we were tagging people, all of that joyous fun of PE lessons. And as the last drill, if you will, of the lesson, we did a race between 2 relay teams, of which I was the last runner. So obviously when you do something like that, you want to go really fast, you want to win. I was all in for that. So that was like the pinnacle of the lesson. So I gave it my all. I full on sprinted it out. To be honest, I don't even remember if we won. So maybe we won, maybe we didn't. I don't think we did, but that's not a bit of the day I recall, to be honest. And after the sprinting I didn't feel particularly unwell. I just felt like you would if you just full on sprinted and like given it your all. Just a bit out of breath, bit tired, just as you do after a healthy person has just sprinted a few hundred meters. And then we transitioned, like the second half of our PE lesson was indoors, so it was basketball, I think, and we were walking down the corridor into basketball, and I just suddenly felt so unwell, and I can't even describe the feeling that it was. It was a feeling I'd never had in my life, that just was so overwhelming, and I don't think I even thought anything in the moment. I just thought like I need to get down, and I just pretty much threw myself on the floor, and was like sitting on the floor just like literally with my like head like in my lap, just like holding my head, because it was honestly, I can't even explain it. Like, I didn't know your heart could pulse through your body that much. It just was the most intense feeling of like everything pulsing, like every inch of your body, and you couldn't really put it into words, but it was sort of that feeling of I'm going to be sick or I'm going to faint. And I just sort of was so disorientated and so overwhelmed. I just didn't really notice like anything that was going on. I was just lying there in the moment like, oh my gosh, like I just felt so unwell. So my PE teacher came over to me and she was like, you look really unwell, you're gonna faint. And she like got my legs and like put them up a wall, and obviously I'd never like experienced it before, so I was a bit like, what on earth is going on? All I knew was that I just felt so unwell. I just felt like my head was on fire, and it just felt like it was going to explode because it was just pulsating so much. And now I've sort of had the experiences and been living with this for more, I know that feeling is probably a rate quite high, like probably 200, like over 200, way over 200, sort of that overwhelming feeling. And so she like lied me down, like got my legs up a wall, and then I was like, I'm gonna be sick. So she was like, oh gosh, like here we go. And so she'd got my legs up the wall, and about maybe a minute after I'd had my legs up the wall, they started like really violently shaking. And that's a really specific thing that I remember of the day, because I was like lying on the floor just completely like disorientated and out of it. But I just remember my legs like smashing against the wall. Another PE teacher came over and she was like, what are you doing? Like, why have you got your legs up the wall? You're gonna like hurt someone. And then my other PE teacher came back again and she was like, oh, you look so unwell. She was like, we need to get you straight to the nurse. So they managed to get me over to the nurse, and we have like a school nurse in like the main school building of my school, because I was in obviously the PE department. I was like I was shaking so violently. It's not like now it's harder to compare now, because now I have seizures that are like violent shaking and kicking and punching, but this was like full on, like proper, like my whole body was going for it. So I got to the nurse and she was convinced it was just because I'd done like excessive PE. She thought it was probably just sugars or something, so she gave me loads of glucose, and she actually gave me I think a whole one of those things of glucose. She gave me at least 7 of them, because I remember her just like giving me more and more and more, and I was just like chewing them down, and she's like, it's going to stop you shaking, it's fine, like this is going to help you stop shaking. And I was like, oh okay. So obviously I'd been in school at this point for 7 years, and I had never once, apart from once when I cut my knee open, been to the school nurse. And this is a nurse that like people go to all the time for like headaches and stuff, and I'd be in school unwell, and I was just one of those people that never would go to the nurse or never would have a day off school. She knew I was really unwell because she was like, I've never seen you before. So the day that she told me afterwards, the day that you came in, I knew you were ill because I've never seen you in my room in 7 years. So about 10 glucose tablets later, I was still violently like shaking, and I just felt so unwell. I was bright red. Like I've got a picture from that day in A&E, and literally I'm like a tomato. I was just so red, so sweaty. I just felt so ill, but obviously I didn't know what that feeling was. I didn't know that feeling was being caused by my heart at the time. And it wasn't until I was like lying there like completely flat that I realised that this like overwhelming feeling everywhere was my heartbeat. So obviously the incident happened in PE. I've been sprinting. This was around 2:30, 2ish. And I lied completely flat in my nurse's room for 2 hours, and she pretty much just fed me glucose and I just lied there. And then I'd been lying down flat for about 2 hours and I was still shaking, and she once again thought that it was just overexhaustion from PE. She said she's seen it quite a bit. It's just your sugars drop, you just need to get some sugar in you, have a bit of a rest, and it will go away, like you'll be fine by tomorrow sort of thing. And then a while later, once the shaking had sort of calmed a bit, I realised that, as I said, this overwhelming feeling was my heart, and the specific place I remember feeling it was in my stomach, which if any of you guys have heart problems or have any like issues with high heart rates or anything, you'll know that you can really strongly feel your heart here. I think you've got a main artery or something there. And for some reason, I don't know what compelled me to do it, but I counted my heartbeat because I could feel it so strong, and I thought that feels fast to me. Like, I'd never in my life felt my heartbeat, I'd never felt my pulse, I didn't know what it was supposed to be, but for some compelled reason I decided to take my pulse, and to be honest, I'm glad I did, because it gave us a reason as to why I was feeling so unwell. I took my pulse, so bear in mind I've been lying flat for nearly 3 hours at this point. I knew I'd missed the bus, but she was planning on ringing mum just to take me home. She was pretty much about to send me off when I said, "Should your pulse rate be 130? And she just looked at me, and I never forget the face. She was like, "What do you mean?" And I was like, is that like what your pulse rate should be? And from somewhere in my mind, I thought that your pulse was supposed to be 100 plus your age. So I thought my pulse was supposed to be 115. So in my mind, 130 was like pretty normal. So I said to her, "Should it be 130? And she was like, "Why'd you ask?" And I was like, I could feel my heart really strong, and for some reason I decided to count it, and it's 130, is that like normal? And she just went, "It won't be 130, no, I'll take it for you, you'll have counted wrong." So she like swizzled over on her chair, like come over with her stethoscope, and I just remember like she took my pulse, and I was sort of like not laughing, but I thought, well, I guess in 15 years, if you've never been really unwell, you don't think about it for a minute. I just thought it was because I'd exercised and tomorrow I'd wake up absolutely fine. And she took my pulse and she just looked at me, and I was like, "What?" And she grabbed my other wrist, and she like got both my wrists, and she was like really focusing on it, and I was like, is it 130? Did I count it? Is it lower than that? And she was like, "It's 160 to 170. And I was like, "Oh, that's a bit high." And she was like, "That's really high, it should be about 70. And I was like, oh, because obviously in my mind I thought it was supposed to be 115. Goodness knows where I got that from, but that was my pre-illness expectation of a heart rate, I guess. So by this time my mum had like pulled up in the car park, and she was like, "You need to go straight to A&E, like that's, your heart shouldn't be doing that." When I got there, sure enough, my heart was 160 to 180-ish, just like lying flat, and they were like, "Oh, this isn't right," sort of thing. Just sort of kept me in resus, watched my heart rate, and maybe 5-6 hours later it came down to the low 100s-ish. So they were happy to let me go. They said, "You did a lot of excessive fitness. It's probably just been one of those things, your heart just didn't recover from that workout very well, so it's just stayed high for whatever reason, or maybe what the most likely reason is, you probably got a little bit of a virus going around, because there was loads of viruses going around at the time, just affecting your heart rate a bit because your body's trying to fight off that infection." Went home, struggled to like walk. I just felt really unwell when I was walking. I was shaking, like anytime I tried to stand up my legs would be like shaking like jelly, but once again they were like, it's just because of the exercise. So I went home. From then on, basically I just never have felt normal or remotely well since. So the next morning, same thing, woke up like heart absolutely like pounding out of my chest. My vision was all like spotty and black. I like tried to stand up and fell straight back down. I was just overwhelmingly dizzy, and it just was a horrible feeling, really. A couple of days later, I think it was, I ended up back in hospital, heart rate way back up, way too high, same sort of thing. It's probably just still a virus that you're fighting off. Pretty much sort of sent home. The next day or the day after that, my heart rate was even higher, so mum rang 111 because she was like, "I'm not taking you back to A&E because it's like they're not going to do anything, they'd already done nothing twice." So we rang 111, and he said to go back to A&E, and basically I got accused of taking drugs, and that this was like a classic symptom of a certain drug. Mum was like, "I know my child, I promise you she's not taken any drugs." I was like, I swear to you I haven't taken any drugs." This guy was getting really aggressive on the phone, like, "Well, you don't always know your own child, and teenagers go behind their parents' backs." So yeah, we sort of left that, and then a few days later, same thing happened again. I couldn't stand up, I could barely sit up, my heart was just pounding out of my chest. I just felt the sickest I've ever felt in my life from that point, like from before that. So we went back to A&E, and there was a man there, and he was the cardiologist, like doing the rounds at that time. And he came around and he was like, "Oh, your heart rate is really high." And he was like, "Do you notice any like change like in it, and I was like, oh, standing up just like really difficult, like even sitting up's really difficult. I just start to feel really like really like woozy. I get like spots in my eyes, I get really dizzy, and I just have to like throw myself on the floor if I don't like collapse first. Oh, okay, so he like went and got his stethoscope, took my heart rate and everything. I didn't really think anything of it. He stood me up pretty much quite quickly after he stood me up. He sat me straight back down again, and he was like, I know what this is. And we were like, oh my gosh, like he knows what it is, because we've been told over and over again for the last 2 weeks, I think, about at this point, that it was just a virus and that it would just go away. And we were at this point now saying like, wouldn't this virus be getting better? And they were like, no, these viruses can go on for like 6 weeks, you just got to wait it out. And I was a really like studious person, and GCSEs were up and coming, and I couldn't even barely sit up, so I definitely wasn't at school. He came back and he said, okay, follow me. And he took us over to a computer screen, and it was the NHS website for POTS, and he went, you have this. And we just sort of looked at him, and he was like, yeah, you've got this, you've got POTS, you just need to drink water and eat salt, and it will go away. So we were like, oh, right, that's it then, just water and salt. And he was like, yeah, just water and salt, and if that doesn't help, then just come back to A&E and we'll give you some beta blockers, but you know, it's not a major thing, it'll be fine. Just sort of sent us home. And then mum started like reading up about it, and she was like, oh my gosh, this literally matches everything that you have, like does about 20 to 30 symptoms, and I had every single one of them. And we were like, wow, this is literally exactly what I am. But sort of reading it, we realised that it didn't really seem as simple as salt and water, but we thought we'll try it. So it was sort of then over the next few months, nothing really changed. If anything, it just got worse. And so, as I said, this started in March 2016, and so bear in mind that my GCSEs are starting in May 2016. So I had off from when I fell ill, March the 3rd, until GCSEs. I didn't really go into school. I just did all my studying at home as much as I could, but I had to do it all lying down. I literally couldn't even sit up for 10 minutes to revise. Thankfully, I got a system that was start-stop system. So as soon as I started to feel faint, they could like get me on the floor. I could like lie and recover, and then they'd like help me sit back up again, lie me back down again, sort of thing, like start and stop the clock as much as I needed. And I remember one particular GCSE exam was so hard, and it was my English exam, and it was a 2-hour exam, and it took me 4.5 hours, and I think I come out 30-40 times. I could literally barely sit up for 10 minutes, and I'd start to faint. My invigilator was so lovely. She'd been with me for about a week at this point, so she knew me really well. She could see me start to go pale. She'd literally come over, like grab me, put me on the floor, and I'd just lie there for like 10-15 minutes until I could like properly see and hear again, pretty much. And then she'd like lift me back up onto the chair, and I'd do another 10 minutes, same thing, and that was it for 4.5 hours. It was just relentless. It was such a hot day as well, which obviously I didn't realise at the time, but that was probably why I was struggling so much, because it was so hot. And literally they were giving me like 4 ice packs every 20 minutes, and I was thawing them out because I was just so hot. That was what happened with that, and I was actually so proud because I got an A in that exam. And considering I pretty much half fainted every 10 minutes and was like put on the floor and then lifted back up again, like half conscious, I'm pretty proud of myself for that. So that was how my GCSEs went. They were all pretty much the same. It was just sit up as long as you could, get put on the floor, sit back up again. In this process, we were trying to find a POTS specialist or someone that would get me on another medication, because we realised that salt and water were doing nothing, literally doing nothing for me. So we were trying to find a specialist, but the specialist we found said that they couldn't do a tilt table test until I was 16, and I would be 16 on June the 1st, and this was about halfway through May, because I was just finishing off my exams. So we pretty much just had to settle for that, and we just thought, well, we've waited 3 months up to this point, we can wait another couple of weeks. I had my tilt table test because they couldn't start me on any medications until, no, they did start me on a medication. They started me on fludrocortisone, but it didn't do anything for me. So I was on fludrocortisone, which is a steroid that helps you retain water. I was on that with water and salt, but it wasn't doing anything for me, and they couldn't start me on Midodrine or any like unregulated medication until I'd had an official diagnosis via a tilt table test. So I eventually got the tilt table test. I think it was the day after my birthday, so I was literally just 16. So if you bear in mind that POTS criteria is 30 beats, so all my heart had to do was go up by 30 beats from lying to standing, and I went from 70 to 178. So they were like, yep, you definitely got POTS, like you've gone up over 100 beats, so you've like tripled the criteria. I got officially diagnosed with POTS, and as far as I was concerned, that was like the end, sort of, because I thought I'll get put on my miracle drug of Midodrine, and it will like control all my symptoms, and that'll be like the end of this struggle. And I guess you always have that hope that that next drug that you try will be the one. I'm still on Midodrine to this day, so I've been on it for 2 years, and it does make a difference, but I'm not going to say it's a lifesaver, but it makes some difference. And if you don't know, Midodrine helps to constrict your blood vessels. So in ideology, I think that should be literally the cure of POTS, because the main issue that you faint and your heart rate goes all out of whack is because your blood vessels don't constrict. So surely a vasoconstrictor should be the answer, but obviously it doesn't work out. A lot has happened over the last 2 years. I got diagnosed with POTS. I had 1 or 2 months where I actually had some relief in symptoms, and I did my first year of sixth form, and I could walk around school. Like I could actually do some walking around school, and although I was exhausted and my heart and everything was still not under control, I wasn't faint, well I was, but it was nowhere near as bad. Like I could walk, and I was so thankful for that. And then sort of January 2017, I got diagnosed with EDS because they realised that, well, my POTS doctor was like, I think there's more going on because you should be so under control by now and you're only getting worse. So I got referred to someone else and got diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and then everything basically started going a bit more wrong in January 2017. I started having like violent shaking episodes like I'd had on the first ever day I was ill. They just sort of got worse and worse, and in March 2017, so a year on from diagnosis, I had the worst episode I'd had of this shaking, and like my legs were full on kicking, like full on smashing kicking. I made such a racket in A&E, and then they admitted me as well. I was making such a racket because I was like smashing all the metal bars, and I had 13 hours of violent kicking, basically is the only way I can describe it, because literally my legs were like smashing like that, if you imagine both my legs doing that. And my heart rate was way over 200 for 13 hours, and they were too scared to give me anything because they didn't understand my condition. They didn't know what it was. They wanted to refer me to a specialist heart hospital in Leicester, but that never happened. They just admitted me to the high dependency unit for a few days. I think it was about 15 hours I stopped shaking, but oh my gosh, I've never been so sore and so exhausted. Literally, like, imagine kicking non-stop for 13 hours. It wasn't the nicest thing, but little did I know it was going to get worse. So over the course from January 2017 through to September 2017, these episodes happened more and more and got more and more violent. So they went from sort of a little twitch in my leg to a kick in my leg to full on smashing with my legs to, in about July-ish through to September, they became like full-on seizures. So it would be like smashing legs, smashing arms, my torso would be all like arched, my head would be like smashing back, and like I wouldn't know where I was, like I couldn't see or hear or anything. So they become like full-on seizures that have now been diagnosed as adrenal seizures secondary to postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So they are caused by POTS, but they're one of the worst like complications of my POTS, I guess. It's a really rare thing that you like. Seizures caused by POTS are really, really rare. So it's not listed as one of like the POTS symptoms, but they were diagnosed as caused by my POTS, and I had 50 in a week. And every single one, my heart was over 250 and at one point nearly hit 300. So they were exhausting to say the least, and that whole week was an absolute blur because if I wasn't having a seizure, I was asleep, and I had 50 in a week, so it was just a massive blur. That pretty much is my POTS journey up to this point. My POTS isn't really any more under control, to be honest. I'm now on quite a few more medications to keep it under control, but my heart is still all over the place. I still struggle to sit up and stand up. This is an accomplishment. The fact that I've been filming for nearly half an hour sitting up is ridiculous for me. Like, that's a really long time for me to be sitting up, and I'm feeling quite unwell for it, to be honest now. But it's worth it because I wanted to make this video for you guys. But I hope that's given you a bit of an insight sort of into my pot still story, how my pot started, because I literally went from a completely healthy 15-year-old to one who could barely stand in a moment, and that is how quickly things can change. And little did I know that that would happen one day, and I just wouldn't get better for up to this point 2 years. So that is my pot story. That is how everything began. That is the story through. I can go more in detail on EDS and my seizures in other videos. Hello again. I'm sorry that the lighting may have changed, and in fact the day has changed because I accidentally deleted the end of the video, the idiot that I am, and then didn't feel well enough to refilm it. But here I am, refilming the end of the video. But I wanted to give an overview of what I had said. You can look back on those 2 years, or generally however long you've been battling with chronic illness, and you can see it in a negative way, and you can see it as a time you lost things because, I mean, let's be real, you lose friends, you lose opportunities, you lose even family at times, and you do lose a lot to chronic illness, and sometimes even your ability to leave the house. But there are things you gain as well. You gain a new strength, you gain a new outlook on life and a new perspective, you gain a new kindness and a new empathy towards people, because I feel like I act differently towards people now, and I don't judge people. Not that I think I judged them before, but you learn not to judge people because you never know what someone is going through or what they may have been through to make them like they are today. And I just think, don't ever, I know it's cliche, but don't judge a book by its cover, and don't judge someone until you know their story. And that's one of the most valuable things I've learned through 2 years of chronic illness, is just to not judge anyone. If they stand up out of their wheelchair, it doesn't mean they're fake. Have you ever taken a minute to consider that maybe walking might leave them in excruciating pain or cause them to collapse? They may be able to stand up, but that doesn't mean that they can walk. And I think that's one of the most vital things that I would just want to tell everyone more than anything, is please just don't judge anyone, because you have no idea what they've been through. Even if you think you know, you probably still don't even know the full story. I just also wanted to say that life isn't a race. Like, I know when you're well, it feels like there is a structure to life, and that is the structure you have to go by. So for me, it felt like once I'd got my GCSEs, I'd get my A-levels. Once I'd got my A-levels, I'd go to uni, I'd find a partner, we'd get married, we'd have children. Like, that's the way that life seems to be, and that is the pre-structured routine of life almost. But life isn't a race, and the things don't have to happen in that order, and they don't have to happen straight after each other. And at first that is so hard to accept. Like, when I was first ill, I felt like my life was just falling apart, because as I'd seen it, all the other path I could ever go down was A-levels, and I was just so upset. I was like, I can't do my A-levels, I'm never going to get anywhere. And it is so hard to accept at first, but believe me, not very long after, you realise that it's true. You don't need A-levels and you don't need uni straight away. You need to look after yourself, because the most important thing that you have is your health. Like, at the end of the day, your health is your life, and you need to look after that, and you need to look after your body, because if you push yourself too far, you're just going to end up in a worse situation. And take it from me that pushed through school for a year and ended up in the worst point of my health I've ever been in. Thinking you're being strong and thinking you're pushing on and not taking a break is not the way to go. Like, you'll end up falling apart. There will come a point where your body and your mind will have had enough, and they will just break down in front of you. And you don't want to hit that point. If you pace yourself and take it slowly, you can reach those goals that you want to. It may take a bit longer, but you'll have done it the right way, because you won't crash at the end of it. And that is advice that I'd give to you guys. Life isn't a race. Take it as slow as you need. You'll still get there, and going the longer route, maybe the more scenic route, and you may see better things and become a better person for it than people who just rush through life and everything comes their way. With hardship comes knowledge, I guess. And just remember that being strong doesn't mean never breaking down and never taking a break. It doesn't mean never shedding a tear. And true strength comes from breaking down and then carrying on. It's not never breaking down, it's not never crying, it's smiling again after you've cried, and it's carrying on again after you've broken down. And I know that you're all strong and you can all do this. And I just wanted to say, don't judge anyone by their cover, don't judge anyone's story until you truly know it. and know that life isn't a race. Whatever way you have to go about life is the way you're gonna have to go about it. Health is the most important thing you have. Nothing comes before your health, because your health is your life. And thirdly, sorry guys if the lighting keeps changing, my heart isn't very happy with me today, so I keep needing to take breaks and come back to it, but I will get through the end of this clip. I don't even remember what I was saying. My most important piece of advice would just be, please do not stop fighting until you have the answers, the help and the diagnoses that you deserve. Like, don't let yourself be palmed off and sent home over and over again. And I know it happens and it's so hurtful, and sometimes you just think, I'm just not going to go back. Like, I just can't keep doing this, because you go, they assess you, they say it's fine, or they say, oh, you've got this condition, we know that, and they send you home. But when you know something is wrong, you know something is wrong. You know your own body, and you know when it's not just a virus, or it's not just a condition that you have. Like, I think it doesn't matter how many chronic illnesses you have, you know when there is something else going on. It doesn't matter if you have 6 chronic illnesses. If you have a new symptom, and you know it's not related to your other illnesses, doctors should believe that, and they should respect that, and they should look into other things. And I just don't want you to be pressured to just stop going back, because believe me, it can lead to very drastic circumstances if you just stop going back, and it takes something that traumatic to happen until someone listens to you. And I don't want that for you guys. I don't want you to have to go through something horrific before anyone listens to you. And I just encourage you, please don't stop fighting and don't stop going back. Keep going back, because there will be one doctor on one round who will listen to you and who will say, this isn't right. And I know that from my own heart issues besides POTS, that I went back so many times. It's just POTS, it's just POTS. You've got POTS, you've got a pre-existing condition, that's what it is. And it took one doctor to say, this isn't POTS, her heart rate shouldn't be nearly 200 when she's lying flat, we need to look into other things. And that is what you need. You need that one person to say that. And I've experienced it with seizures, and I've experienced it with my new heart problems. You get palmed off over and over again, because if you have an existing condition, you're pigeonholed in this place. You have this condition, that must be causing everything. But sometimes things aren't caused by that. And just because you have one condition doesn't mean that everything is caused by that one condition. It's more than likely you probably have other conditions too. Especially if you have EDS, there is a multitude of comorbidities that go with EDS. So I would just say, don't stop advocating for yourself, don't stop fighting for yourself until you feel comfortable and you feel safe and like you've got a treatment plan. Don't stop going back. And sometimes it may just feel like people aren't listening to you, but eventually someone will listen to you, and it's not worth the dangerous things that could happen at home to you when you're not going into hospital, because you need answers and you need help and you need to get that diagnosis. So yeah, I would just say, please don't stop fighting, and I'm so proud of you. You're all so strong and you're an inspiration. And if you fight chronic illness in any way, then my gosh, you are brave and you are inspirational, because it is a hard thing sometimes. It becomes a full-time job, 24/7, looking after your own body, and I don't think people congratulate you enough for that. So here I am congratulating you. Well done for fighting this every day, because it is flipping hard sometimes, and I am proud of you. So that is basically my advice after 2 years, that I think that it makes you a better person, it makes you a stronger person, it gives you better empathy and person skills, because you know how to give love and kindness, and you know when you're in a hard situation the words you want to hear and the words that you don't want to hear. And it also gives you a different perspective on life. It allows you to celebrate the small things that happen, and it means that you're not always focusing on the next big thing, because I think if you're focusing on the next big goal all the time, you miss the small beauties that happen every single day. And if that is all you can focus on because you're housebound or bedbound, then that is when you find the true beauty of life, even though it may not see it on some days. And remember that you're allowed to have your down days, because that is more than okay. As I said, it's a hard thing, it's a hard fight, but I know that all of you are strong enough to fight it. So that is my advice really after 2 years, and that is my story of how this all started in a moment and how my life changed on March the 3rd, 2016. And I'm actually filming this finishing segment on March the 3rd, 2018. So exactly 2 years on, that is my advice. Don't stop fighting for yourself. You're so much stronger than you believe, and allow yourself to break down, allow yourself to have bad days. That doesn't mean you're weak, that means you're even stronger, and I admire you and respect you for that. You are an inspiration. Don't forget it and don't stop fighting. Love everyone around you and see the beauty in every day, because life alone is a gift. I may not have my health, but I have a family who love me and friends who support me. And just remember that life is a gift. This day is a gift and life is precious, and you know that because you probably know how fragile life can be. You're incredible, and so much love to all of you. Pots of love and hope.